start by saying I'm not nearly interesting enough to occupy too much time here. I am pleased to be here. I am recently retired after 44 years of service to the annual conference. I grew up in South Nashville, attended Glencliff High School, went to Martin Methodist College, played tennis there, still trying to play tennis badly, but still trying. Left there and went to, by the time I left Martin, I was already a student local pastor serving with Ben Alford, who became one of my very, very closest friends. Then I went on to Athens State College, which was in Athens, Alabama, majored in psychology there. Entered the divinity school, was appointed to the Gordonsville charge in Smith County, and commuted to Vanderbilt from there. Excuse me. Managed to graduate and then was appointed to the Allgood Church, which is, if you know Putnam County, it is a suburb of Cookeville. Allgood, it's a lovely little town. After that, I was appointed to be on staff at Hendersonville First Methodist with Ben Alexander. Some of you may know Ben or had heard of Ben.
No, Ben.
There, I was appointed to the Conference Council on Ministries, where I served for 9 years in various capacities. Most notably, I suppose, was overseeing the two campgrounds, Beersheba and Cedar Crest, and also working with the conference youth. So I did that for a pretty good bit of time. Was then appointed to Bethlehem United Methodist Church, which is over in Grassland. From there, I was appointed to Columbia First Methodist. And from there, I was appointed to Forest Hills. And from there to Belmead. So I suppose you could say I can't keep a job. They seem to keep sending me to various places. On a more personal note, I am married to Terry. Terry is really the more notable of the two of us. Terry is the CEO for the Center for Nonprofit Management here in Nashville. And if you don't know that organization, it's a large one. It's a member organization. She describes it as sort of being like a chamber of commerce for the nonprofits in the area. And so they do training of staffs, and they provide resources in various ways. She has over 800 nonprofits under her umbrella, and that's not nearly all of them. So it's a big job, and so she's doing well. We have 4 daughters and 2 granddaughters, and that seems to keep us pretty busy. And I guess besides the tennis, which I'm still doing, I'm also learning how to sail. I started about 3 years ago and have been learning ever since. So one on my bucket list is to go down to the Caribbean, actually around to the British Virgin Islands, and get my captain's license, because I would really, really like to charter a bareboat, what they call a bareboat. You just charter it and you pilot it and go wherever you want. So that's something I'd really like to do somewhere down the way, hopefully soon. So that's probably more than you wanted to know. I am here to work with congregational care. I'm not 100% sure what that means yet. We're learning on a daily basis. Once buildings start opening up again, hospitals start opening up again, and our capacity to conduct funerals, all of that's coming relatively soon, I think. So I'm going to be involved in all of that to one extent or another.
Not that I've had many more failures, but this is a one failure I wanted to talk about. The story begins that it was a beautiful day like today in North Carolina when I was assigned to Fort Bragg. And the winds were real light, and that's important because I was parachutist at that time with the 82nd Airborne Division, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, as people say. And so Anyway, so I did that for a number of years. I know you can't imagine that, I guess, in a way, but I love it. I love roller coasters too, for that matter. But anyway, a beautiful day, and we're to jump at dusk with this, it's darkness, actually, a night jump, they call it. And so when you jump out of parachuting, there's always a chance of failure. I mean, there's always a risk. Even when you drive a car, is a risk. These days, with traffic and drivers, they are. If you fly on an airplane going somewhere, it's a risk. Every part in life is a risk in some ways. Sometimes you have to do things and take the chance. In this case, I volunteered to take the risk. And so I wanted to be with soldiers, and that's where soldiers were. They're jumping out of airplanes. And so I want to be with them. And so it's part of my calling. And so this day was a beautiful day, like I said before. We got our parachutes on. And if you haven't seen a soldier with parachutes on, you have a big main parachute on your back, a smaller one called reserve area with a handle on it that is a failure on the main parachute. You have this backup, which they train you how to use, and that's part of the story. So I did all this right, did good ministry. I counseled with soldiers. I helped them along, and we laughed, and it was serious business. So we got ready. Well, the excitement built up. We're sitting in an airplane. It's humming along, and it's going along. Our parachutes are there. We're miserable. We're hot. These things are heavy. We were ready to jump out of the airplane, get rid of the parachutes, and nothing else. So the command came: stand up, hook your parachute to the cable that went along the top, and to get ready to go. And we all lined up, and the door opened up, the green light came on, and the jump master yelled, "Go." And adrenaline started pumping. And we started running out of that airplane, off the side of the airplane on both sides. And that's the way we did it. And I exited the aircraft, and I started falling, and I started doing the counting. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1000. And by 4, usually you feel kind of a big shock, a little bit, a jolt, when your main parachute opens up. But I kept counting. 1005, 1006, 1007, and I knew I was in trouble. I looked up, and my main parachute had a thing called a cigarette roll, which means it was rolled up like a cigarette. It was just flapping in the wind because it could not open up. The air could get inside. I was falling, but my parachute has failed me. So but they train you what to do in this time. And so you got the reserve. And so I went back down and hold the handle on the reserve, and I tucked my head in because I was falling pretty strong at that point, and I pulled it, and it started coming out. Way too slow in my opinion, but it came out. And it up, and because I was falling so fast at that time, it really jolted me, and it swung me in the air, but I had a parachute. That's all I cared about. And so I started drifting down to the earth. Well, I'll go into all the other parts of it, but I made it down to the ground, and I went over and handed it back in to the person waiting for it. And then I was safe. A side note, when I got home that night, about 10 o'clock, Karen was already in bed, and I crawled in after a shower, tried not to wake her up, but she was awake waiting on me, and I laid there. I was exhausted. It took about 8 hours to do all this, and so she said, "Well, how did it go?" And I said, "Oh, it's fine." I said, my parachute didn't work. I mean, she bolted up out of that bed, and she said, "What?" It scared her to death. To me, it was over with. Big deal, just part of training. I said, "Oh, it's okay. I'm fine." "Yeah, but," I said, "let's just go to sleep. I'll tell you about it later." Well, anyway, that's another story about our relationship. Anyway, I'm going to jump ahead. Bear with me, I'm going to jump ahead. Several years later, I'm stationed in Germany. And I'm sitting there, and a young soldier comes in and wants to talk to me about a problem. I can't remember what it was. We started talking. He noticed my parachuting airborne stuff on the wall. He said, "Oh, chaplain, you were in the 82nd. I said, "Yes." "When were you?" We start down the memory lane. "Well, I did this, I did that." And we started telling stories. He said, so I said, "Well, one time," I forget why I told him, I said, "my parachute didn't open up." And he wanted to hear all about that. That's very rare that it happens. And so I told him the story. He said, "What date was that?" And I told the date. He said, I jumped right after you on that same drop zone. I said, really? He goes, I got something for you. Will you be here in the next 15 minutes? I said, yeah. He left out of the room. He comes back and he hands me a reserve parachute handle. He said, I was on the drop zone and I found this. And they don't lay around. There's none, you can't find those. I said, this has got to be the one I pulled. He said, it's got to be. I said, where was it? He told me where on drop zone it was. I said, that's about where I landed when I started coming down. Of all times, the odds of me having that handle is unbelievable. He said, you earned this. You keep this handle. Well, I hung on a wall and I gazed at it quite often. And here's my point of the whole story. I did not look at that handle as a sign of failure, but it was a failure in one sense. I failed many times the things where I tried something, took a risk, and I failed doing something right. I took a risk loving someone. I took a risk being nice to someone. I took a risk driving. I took a risk of trying to be nice on the road and still get yelled at by drivers, whatever it may be. I've taken risk, and I have failed in a lot of things I have done. So the handle was not a failure on my part. What it was a symbol of how I handled failure. What it was, as I gazed at that, was I used all the training given to me. I used all the resources given to me by the Army to survive and to deal with that failure moment of that parachute. It is through my own resources and my faith in myself and my faith in God that I came through that with victory. So when I'm looking at that handle, and I lost it a long time ago in our many moves, when I look at that handle, it reminds me that I endured, that I was tenacious, that I was faithful to my training and resources and my confidence in myself and my faith in my God. It was a symbol of all that. So our failures come in many sizes and shapes, big and small. We have failed sometimes to smile when someone needed to smile. We have failed to give a kind word when someone needed a kind word. We have failed sometimes to be in a good mood and be happy and joyful as a Christian because something's bothering us and people feel that. So we've failed in that area as well. We've failed by being sharp or maybe a little bit too short with people because of something they said or done. And so we look back on that with regret. But through all those moments of failure, because we risk trying to do the best we can, that failure will come. But because we have our faith, because we believe in ourselves, because we endured, we will endure through that failure and make it a victory in some form. Because our faith is better because we tried. So today's lesson is this, as we enter into the latter part of Lent, into Holy Week, that this is a time in Jesus' life of many failures. Many times when he tried to do the best he could by healing people, by being kind to people, and they still rejected him. They still were not there for him. But he did not give up. He kept enduring. He kept on pulling that reserve handle of faith and kept going forward. So we have our reserve handles, each one of us. So be ready to pull it, because you're going to need to over and over again, because God has given it to you, because you are a child of the living King. Have a wonderful, beautiful day. Amen.